electrical service by Palmetto Electric, telecommunications by Hargray, and all remaining letters can be provided at the time of final development plan submittal. At this time, no phases have been indicated for construction. That could always change when we get into the final development plan. Very rarely would anyone try to construct 87 lots at one time. They probably would phase this just to facilitate the closeout process so that they can issue COs on houses as they are constructed rather than waiting for everything to be built before they issue a CO. Rich, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this screen. I feel like I'm leaving you.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
But any phasing would be approved in conjunction with their final development plan. And we would make sure that any phase could operate independently were it to be phased as such. So, and last criteria, the application has been reviewed by staff and we have determined the application is complete. So tonight, the Planning Commission, you have the authority to approve this application as submitted. You can approve the application with conditions. You could table the application and request some updated exhibits or information, or you could deny the application as submitted. Now, as I indicated when I started, initially, without any changes to the plan, staff was going to recommend that it be denied because it could not function as intended under the Unified Development Ordinance. After working with the applicant literally up until late this afternoon, we are recommending that you approve this application with conditions, two conditions: that the applicant be required to update the plans to show a 20-foot front setback on all lots. And secondly, to update the exhibit for the cross-section of the road profile to reflect the new 20-foot setback. And if I may, I've got a PDF I'm going to pull up here just to help demonstrate what we're talking about here. So I should be able to zoom in on this. So here we're looking at the road, the front setback. So as you can see, 12 feet from the road, there's absolutely no way anyone could ever pull their car into that driveway and not encroach into either the right-of-way, depending on how the profile is determined and constructed, or into the road itself. However, if that were moved, and I did not put a dimension on here, but if that were moved 8 feet interior to the lot, 20 feet would accommodate most normal size. It would accommodate my pickup to be in the driveway without encroaching into the roadway. The second condition, in conjunction with moving that setback, the applicant, we also require them to provide an example of the road profile that shows the travel lanes, a parking lane, sidewalk widths. So we would ask them, in conjunction with the new setback, they would also be required to provide a new cross-section of the road profile that would demonstrate how that would be laid out. So I am happy, after all of that, I am happy to answer questions. And we have the applicant of record, the applicant, as well as the attorney for the applicant are here as well.
Would the applicant like to speak?
Thank you. We're going to tag team y'all a little bit if that's okay. My name is Robert McCorkle from the law firm McCorkle, Johnson, McCoy in Savannah. We've got John Giordano here with me. I did say that right? Close enough. Okay, close enough. Just call him John. He likes it. It's fine. And one, I want to just thank y'all for being here tonight. Obviously, we know the town had specific items on the agenda as well, but this is our third attempt to have this heard. We had an electrical outage, and then we had a time crunch last time, and then now we're back here today on a third attempt. Maybe ultimately it was to everyone's benefit because we were working on this until I got in my car at 5:10, working with Will and with Richardson and everybody else on this. And I appreciate both y'all's patience to have us here tonight, as well as y'all's with working with us as we go through this. I don't know most of you. I do a lot of land use and zoning and entitlement work in Southeast Georgia and some in South Carolina. It's been a couple years since I've been in Bluffton for anything. Tonight's hearing is a little bit unusual for me, I will say, other than the fact that it's the third try. It's a little unusual because it's a site plan hearing, and I don't often get asked to attend site plan hearings for our clients, particularly preliminary site plan hearings. The reason generally is that site plans are supposed to be or are a process of kind of objective review. You go through this process with staff and the idea is, does it meet the zoning criteria or not? Does it meet the design standards or not? Almost every municipality that we work in has a very similar ordinance to y'all's as far as what the criteria are and what the criteria is for getting a site plan approved. Unlike zonings and variances and special conditions and a lot of the other things that y'all hear, the criteria for a site plan don't include the words intent. It doesn't include detrimental to neighbors. It doesn't include consistency with character of the area. It doesn't include consistency with the comprehensive plan. It doesn't include any of those kind of subjective terms that are typically found in zonings and variances and a lot of the other things that y'all deal with. I think the general idea is that if a piece of property is zoned and it is owned by an owner and it is zoned for the use and they want to use it for that use, if it meets the design criteria, then the site plan is to be approved. The owner has vested rights to use that property as long as height and buffers and parking and density and the things that are set forth to guide them in the design of their project are met. And Bluffton UDO, as was shown up there earlier, 3.10.3 is generally the one real standard that's applying to what we're here for tonight. And it says the proposed development must be in conformance with applicable provisions provided in Article 5 design standards. That's it. Conformance is whether something meets a specified standard. And so we believe that the plan that we provided and that we originally submitted, and that was before y'all tonight in your packet, does in fact meet all of the requirements of the design standards. The one design standard that was pointed out as not being met, if it was pointed out as not meeting the intent of the setback. This has been a little bit of a struggle going back and forth with us on this, honestly, because I didn't know setbacks had intents, and it's a little unclear. Your ordinance also happens to have a provision in it that explains what the intent of the setback is. And just to be clear, the setback as it exists, these are small house lots. The setback as it exists in section or table 5.8.3b, it just says small house lots, 10-foot minimum, 24-foot maximum. That's all it says. There's no explanation as far as what that means or whether 10 feet is for a certain type of house or 24 feet is for a certain type of house. It just says minimum and maximum. Luckily, there is guidance in your ordinance, which is very well written in section 9.3. And section 9.3 specifically addresses how to interpret a setback line. And it says that a setback line is a distance between the property line and the nearest part of the applicable building or structure. And it says, in cases where setback lines are listed as a range, indicating a minimum and a maximum setback, the range shall be interpreted as a build-to range at or within such distance the building line must be established. So it is, in fact, a range within which the building line must be established. It can be 10 feet, it can be 24 feet, it can be 10 and a half, it can be 17, it can be 16. But all that's provided in the ordinance is a range. And that range we have to provide a building line within that range. And we've done that in the plan that was submitted to you. We worked really hard with staff over a year, and you saw some of the back and forth. And we believe that the project has gotten better and better throughout this project, absolutely. And it got better today, to be honest with you. But either way, whether it's with the conditions or with what we've submitted already, the site plan meets the requirements of the design standards. The only criteria that we really have. So it should be approved either way. The good news is that we're in support of the conditions that were reached, support of those suggestions that are being made that were mentioned by Will. I think that it's going to make a better project. And I'm going to hand it over to John, and he's going to go through a little bit of the design criteria with y'all and what those standards are and what we've shown, and then also talk a little bit about the conditions.
Good evening, John Giordano with Thomas & Hutton. We let Robert go first because he's a much better speaker than I am, so I'm just a lowly engineer. And again, want to thank the town and staff for working with us through this process, because this has been a long process. And I'm just going to real quick kind of run through the site plan as it was submitted. I know Will has already kind of gone through that, but just kind of recap it again. So as Will mentioned, this is an assemblage project. So there were multiple parcels that were that are looking at combining and developing this new subdivision. It's approximately 24.8 acres, so just shy of 25. And the current plan proposes 87 single-family residential lots, which it is zoned RG, residential general, which allows for up to 4 dwelling units per acre. So with a lot count of 87, we're currently beneath that. We're at 3.48 dwelling units per acre. As mentioned, we are proposing small house lots. The lot width, 30-foot minimum, 50-foot maximum. We're proposing 42-foot wide lots throughout. Coverage, 65% max. We are beneath that. Our lot coverage will be beneath that. Maximum height of 3 stories. None of the proposed building types that are proposed for this project will exceed 3 stories. As mentioned, 42-foot wide lot width at the setback. So buffers, we are proposing buffers along the perimeter of this project. We do want to acknowledge that, we are proposing single-family residential, and the adjacent properties are also single-family residential. So per the UDO, we don't necessarily feel that any type of buffer is required because we are compatible uses adjacent to each other. That being said, we are still providing buffers surrounding the property. As far as open space calculations, we meet all of the open space requirements as required by the UDO. The required open space for the entire development is 4.96 acres. We're currently providing 10.93 with the plan that was submitted. As part of a residential development, we're required to provide 10% of the gross residential use acreage as open space. So that would result in a required 1.8 acres of open space accessible to the residents. Our current plan provides 2.03, so we have exceeded that. And when you're looking at the site plan, the open space is the green area. The portions of the site plan that are that have the red hatch across the top would be those areas that are being counted towards the residential use acreage. So you can see the mouse working? Yep, okay. So this was the portion of the site that Will had mentioned. We've elected to keep that as open space. We've got there's some very nice oak trees, mature oaks that are in this area. The plan is to provide a walking trail around the pond. There's also a very nice cluster of trees located in this central area. Also wanted to mention that this kind of open space park area was something that came out of some of the early on discussions with staff during our preliminary plan reviews. They had suggested creating kind of this open central park area, and that is also where the mail kiosk is located. So so any of the residents will travel down. We've got on-street parking surrounding the park so that they've got access to the mail kiosk. As far as the current typical section that is submitted, We are using road typical section ST 50-34, which per the UDO is a 50-foot right-of-way. We are proposing a 50-foot right-of-way. Per the UDO, the pavement width is 32 feet. We're actually providing 34. The UDO requires 2 9-foot travel lanes. Our current plan proposes 2 10-foot travel lanes. That's actually where the additional width is coming in. We felt like 10-foot travel lanes were a little bit better for a, not creating a conflict point between opposing traffic. Parking lanes, the UDO, typical section ST 50-34 actually calls out for on-street parking. And so with the reduced setback or the 12-foot setback that we are providing, the on-street parking would provide the additional parking that, Will was referencing, and provide the additional space in order to get into the lot. So that was kind of where we were looking at the parking spaces, was through the use of the on-street parking. We were providing on-street parking on both sides of the road, 2 8-foot parallel parking lanes. The UDO has, for that typical section, actually references a 9-foot sidewalk. We're providing 2 5-foot sidewalks, 1 on each side, so resulting in 10-foot worth of 10-foot walkways. Planter types, the UDO typical section does not require any. We were providing a small 1.5-foot grass strip to just kind of break it up a little bit. And curb type, both the UDO and our proposed typical section provide for curb and gutter. So with regards to the parking, all of these proposed units would have a 2-car parking two-car garage to provide the required 2 parking spaces. However, as mentioned, we would have the on-street parking. That would provide any additional parking for guests, anything like that. So nobody would have to be parking in the driveway and hanging out into the road or anything like that. They would actually be able to park on street. Then, I guess, kind of wrapping this up would come back to the setbacks. And as Robert mentioned, looking through the UDO, the required front setback is a range, 10 feet to 24 feet max. We're providing 12 feet in the currently submitted plan. We meet the 25-foot minimum rear setback, and side setbacks are 5 feet, which also aligns with the UDO. Now, as Robert mentioned, we've been working right up until the last minute, and the conditions that Will has mentioned, we are in agreement with. I mean, we acknowledge that if we go to the 20-foot front setback, it will create a better project. We would go ahead and revise the site plan to show the 20-foot front setback. We would revise the typical section. One question that I did have for you, Will, as you were mentioning that, and we update the typical section, when we go to the 20-foot front setback, we would also want to lose the on-street parking. And so that would provide the travel lanes. We would no longer need the on-street parking in order to prevent a car from hanging out into the travel ways. But so that would be one of the changes that we would want to make to the typical section as part of that conditional approval.
So you just have one side of the parking, you take,
Madam Chairman, if I may, I'd recommend that you allow, if you so choose to move forward with this from a conditional standpoint, is allow staff to work with the applicant as opposed to trying to negotiate during the meeting as to what this road profile will look like.
I'm just wondering what he was saying he was taking one out, one side out.
His current profile, they're showing on-street parking on both sides.
But he would take one out, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's
The one side out.
We would propose to take both sides of the on-street parking out.
and that's where I would
Okay.
let you allow staff to work with
That's
the
fine, I
applicant on
just was
that.
trying to understand what he was saying.
And we can work with staff. We would still want to keep the on-street parking around the Central Square Park area, only just to provide parking for the residents to come and visit that park area. That's also where the mailbox kiosk is, so that would provide parking for that. So, that.
I'll just summarize this up here. You know, I think this process, I think ultimately this process has done what it's for, which is, again, help us make a better project. Again, as I mentioned before, you know, I think the plan as submitted meets the design standards and should be approved. I think the plan with the conditions will meet the design standards and can be approved. With the conditions, you know, we're going to end up with, you know, probably somewhere between 24 and 28 feet between the pavement, or between the sidewalk and the garage, which is obviously plenty of space. These are two lane wide driveways, so you'll have not only a 2-car garage, but 2 off-street parking spaces in those driveways. So we'd ultimately be providing 4 parking spaces per unit, even without any on-street parking. And so we will obviously meet the two space requirement. And so with that, ultimately, we would ask that y'all would approve staff's recommendation with the conditions recommended and help us go forth and build a better project than the one we originally submitted, but let us go forward. That we're happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thank you. I just wanted to defend staff and the UDO real quick. Like, they've done a really great job explaining all of this, and the UDO is not perfect, and we're constantly amending it and the verbiage. We know that there are things that are iffy, but we also have to think of the public health, safety, and welfare, so that's what our job is. So understanding the difference between 10 to 24, I know that's like a gray area, but when you're thinking of a plan and you have a front-loaded product versus a rear-loaded product, that's 2 different things. Yeah, the UDO could spell it out a little bit better. It just doesn't right now, so that's what we have to think about. So.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and you know, when we were coming through it from and staff is doing their job, and you guys are doing your job in any way that anyone wasn't. It's just that from a developer standpoint, you know, the terms rear-loaded and front-loaded don't appear in the UDO. Document. To treat the minimum maximum as an either or, though I understand the intent of it and why, perfectly understand why, it's just not what it provides. But the good news is that we think that we've reached a resolution that resolves the issue. And so by having these conditions in place, the other good news is this is a preliminary site plan. And so we still have to have a final site plan go through this process with staff. And so, you know, these changes I don't think are particularly material, except for that they are materially to the better for the project. And so the good news is that these conditions that staff worked very hard to help us come up with do in fact remove the issue. And so that's where we're at.
Mr. Howard, I think you're probably best to answer, I think, maybe a couple of these questions. One of the comments that was from a previous derivation of this plan, but I think still pertains to the current iteration of the plan, there was a comment about multiple housing types being required. This still only shows one housing type.
Well, it shows one lot.
Okay.
So the applicant has, I did not include in the packet, but the applicant did share the fact that a potential builder that I believe they're working with had multiple products, different house products that would fit these footprints. So they're showing one type of lot, but it's my understanding you have several home plans that will fit on the lots, if that answers your question.
Is there, in this, as the development plan goes through, it would seem to me it's out of staff's hands as this moves forward. Say they decide to sell this, the next person gets that, they only decide one builder, one house plan. Is there any recourse from the town standpoint to enforce a multiple housing type or multiple house forms, I guess, if you will, or models?
That would be from a development plan.
I defer to staff on that question, if that's okay. Is there a part in the final development plan review process where you would or the individual development plans?
Actually, technically, when we're reviewing this plan, we're reviewing horizontal development. We don't review anything in the Unified Development Ordinance outside of the historic district and outside of the highway corridor overlay. We don't review any vertical construction. So we can't guarantee that there would be multiple house site plans. We can only guarantee that they provide all of the horizontal development per the Unified Development Ordinance.
I guess what I should have said was their own master plan or whatever would have dictate what goes in it. We don't do that.
CCNRs, covenants and restrictions.
Yeah,
Yes.
covenants and restrictions, yeah.
Yeah, no, we typically would require them to provide, once recorded, a copy of the CCNRs for their development. And then that would, just like Bluffton Park or just like the Walk or the Landings or any other development, they would have their own architectural requirements.
So there will be something in.
There'll be CCNRs that are required at the time
that
of final
could
development
outline
plan.
that then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that doesn't involve us.
Right, I get that. Well, my point is that in the guidelines, it's in the UDO, it's specific of multiple housing types. So it is enforceable it is something that's within our purview.
But not the vertical, just the
Not the
horizontal.
vertical, right. But when you're creating this 42-foot housing type throughout the entire thing, the way it's worded, and I don't have it pulled up right at the moment, it's indicative that it's not just a specific house product. It's multiple housing types, which would imply to me it could be townhomes, it could be large lot, small lot.
But the way that these lots, I mean, they're individual lots, so it's not a townhome product.
Correct.
Because they're not combined.
Right. So what they're showing is one product.
Single-family resident.
Right. And the way that the code is written, the way I was reading it, I don't have it pulled up at this moment. So there was a verbiage that made me feel as like there should be a second house type to create. And when they identify what a residential general zoning should have, it's a mixed use type. It's a mixed type product.
It shows you the lot size and what fits on that.
I think the section you're referring to is purpose and intent. The RG district is intended to provide for moderate density residential neighborhoods. This district will include a range of dwelling types in an integrated neighborhood setting with other civic recreational uses. Regulations are designed to promote neighborhood character and accommodate a variety of dwelling types.
It's it's the multiple dwelling types.
That's for the
That's
overall.
that
the
also could be
overall-
viewed as applied to the zoning district and not to an individual plan.
Okay.
Oh.
Got it. Okay. There was another comment about the dead-end road by the larger retention pond. That is, obviously, the dead-end road is still there. I saw a comment to the effect of, well, it's going into a road that leads to a dock, which my understanding is our stormwater isn't even allowed to be used for docks. So I'm curious as to, that's obviously, that comment did not stay through to the end, so I was curious how that was addressed.
Honestly, if you would like to make that recommendation as an additional condition of approval, I know that the applicant had submitted at one point a plan that did show the elimination of those few lots and an actual road curve as opposed to an intersection right there. I don't think the applicant would object to that as a condition of approval, and that would be included in their resubmittal materials, and then we would ensure at final development plan that that was the case.
Was there a plan that sketched that out? Because I had the same question she did as far as that dead-end road. Was there a?
It was submitted
idea.
after we had done our staff report. And yeah, we were working on the staff report on their resubmittal, and then they submitted an alternate plan that we didn't have time to review before and
We can
provide it to you.
Make that as a condition to say that they need to address that issue?
Yes.
And then leave it to staff? Correct?
Yeah, that's something that staff, if you include that as a third condition of approval, then staff would make sure that it is addressed accordingly.
Okay. What else you got?
The other question I had was, It's my understanding that per 5.3.7, that street trees are required. As this cross-section is currently drawn, and I know you mentioned something about removing the on-street parking, so this may solve this issue. But the way this is cross-section, typical cross-section is drawn, there's not enough room for a street tree in here. And even if you push those setbacks, if you push the setbacks back, that does help. You could actually get the trees on the lots, but they're supposed to be in the right-of-way, as I understand it. I didn't see any comments regarding street trees in here. Was there?
No, because we haven't received we haven't received a landscape plan. It's also not uncommon when you have a multi-lot subdivision like this, that a lot of times the street tree is planted at the time of construction, actually on homeowner property, and it serves the intent of the street tree, and it's outside of the right-of-way. That way, the POA doesn't have to maintain absorb the expense of maintaining all of those trees and landscape.
So that's something that the staff could review as part of the CCRs, that would be written into the CCRs that could be reviewed. And
It'll also be picked up on that final development plan, and as you guys know, as three of you are part of the DRC, when that final development plan does come through, that you'll be able to provide comments at that time as well. So it'll be.
Well, if it's developed on an individual lot, we wouldn't see it on the final development plan, correct? Or am I mistaken?
If they're not going to provide them on the right-of-way, then they'd have to show them on the lot, right?
They'll show an approximate location of each one of them. What will happen is any tree would not be installed until actually the house is finalized, and that would be part of that CO process.
Same thing happens
Knowing that
with
their house-
sidewalks. No flat work is ever done. They don't go in and construct all the sidewalks and then install all the trees and then grade and build houses. They do it piecemeal as each lot is developed. So it could be reflected on the final development plan as far as the concept of the landscape plan. And then we would just ensure, as part of the CO process, that's when it's inspected, and that's when it would be picked up and ensure that it was to compliance.
I just want to make a comment to the effect of the on-street. I'm supportive of no on-street parking. I didn't know if it was required, because with these 20-foot wide driveways and a 42-foot wide lot, that leaves precisely 22 foot between driveway to driveway, which renders that on-street parking useless entirely. I mean, you could fit in a car in it. It creates sightline issues, getting out of a driveway. It creates, potential neighbor knockout draws, drag out fights of you block my driveway, or your guest blocked my driveway. So unless it's required by the UDO, and I didn't see that, I'm supportive of that being. And then one of the things that MKSK had picked up on their plan was that connection to Ballfield Road. I'm assuming there was a cost factor as to why that wasn't included in this.
There is a connection to Ballfield Road, so
I'm sorry. From the Buck Island entrance.
There is now. Initially, they didn't own that property, and they didn't have an easement across it on the first submittal.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the September 30th site plan, which is what I think is right up here. So MKSK had in their comments that to encourage a connection through that road easement, that's where Ballfield Road ends, looks like it still could connect to the road that connects to Buck Island.
For that new little lake that they just
To the
purchased.
extension, is
Yeah.
that Centerfield? Is that what that's
Talking about
called?
taking Ballfield Road
For that
down
light.
to the new road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right there,
Thank you.
yeah.
And I didn't know if that was just not done as a part of a cost savings thing, but I feel like from a neighborhood standpoint, it would be beneficial that
They
we.
don't own the property. That's a private road
They
from
don't
that
own all
point,
of
and they
those
don't own the property to do
Only
that.
got that part.
So there's a road easement there. There was a road easement I thought I read on one of those.
This road, I think, stops here. That's people's property. drives, like dirt.
Yeah, John.
Sorry about that. It's just an access easement because there's so many of these properties that are back here. I mean, it's just cross-access, so people can drive across somebody else's property to get to their property. But the actual ball field road, it kind of stops back up here. I don't know that it is actual true road right-of-way that comes through here. It's just an access easement.
I think they were just saying it would be nice if they could, but they don't own that, so they
That's
can't.
right. That was our understanding was,
Okay.
you know, should the town in the future decide to acquire the right-of-way,
That would be nice.
we provided a spot where there could be a perpendicular
Got it.
intersection.
Okay.
So,
Yep, all right. I think. Yeah, I think that answers it.
I want to thank staff for working with the applicant to make a workable product that I potentially could support. I know it's looking at it first glance, in the staff report. I know I've been in court enough to know about the intent of ordinances, and I appreciate you all looking out for the town and making sure they comply with the intent.
I guess, as the new guy, is it typical for us to have this many conditions and not see the final product before we approve it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a preliminary plan, so as long as we give the staff conditions, they know how to direct them, and then it's gonna go up for final, and like he said, there's gonna be 3 of us on that anyway to see it, so.
But the answer is we could make it a condition, we could table it and ask for those drawings. Do that here, but that is an option.
I did have one more thing. When those setback lines move back, so one of the things that's commented on here is that it's a 42-foot wide lot at the setback line. On the curve where it's concave, when it goes concave, I don't know what lot numbers those are. I can't see that on there.
40, 41, 42.
No, sorry, actually, it's gonna be
19,
convex.
18,
It's
17?
20, it's over there by the pond.
We would measure it at the corner of the setback line.
Okay, I'm just saying, those lots may or may not be wide enough once you move that setback line. I don't know what they currently are in width on, it's right there by the square to the left of that. You can see when you set that setback line, when you push that setback line into the lot, it's gonna narrow the width of that, so that may change your lot width.
Yeah, it would then, in essence, actually has to be pushed back, so that way that it meets that requirement.
Right, I'm just saying the lots.
I understand what you're talking about and make sure that it's caught.
Yep, that's all I was, yes, thank you.
Yep.
Matt, do you have anything to add? You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Charlie?
Just a comment. I appreciate the developer working with staff because I can't speak to anybody else up here, but I appreciate you working with them, staff. I appreciate you working long
All right, so does anyone want to make a motion?
Well, did you have a proposed motion?
Yeah, well, I don't have a proposed motion. I do have the two
Some recommendations.
conditions that we were proposing. And I believe Commissioner Duncan had a third condition. So
Try that motion.
let me see if I can get that a little larger.
A motion to approve the application with the conditions as stated by town staff and to reconfigure a portion of the portion of the plan to remove the dead end road at the pond. Yes.
She already mentioned that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. There, just in case somebody gets rowdy. Kathleen in line.
I'm still trying to make sure we get out of here before 9.
Okay.
And I just wanted to make sure that it was in the record.
Yes, before hearing agenda items number 2 and 3, to state for the record, Amanda has recused herself for a potential conflict. Okay, should we hear these both together, or is it separate items?
Yes, sir. So, and bear with me while I'm pulling the presentation up. So we have two requests. One is the annexation request, and then the second one is the zoning request. So, presentation-wise, there will be one presentation with 2 actions at the end. So, and if you'd like, I mean, I've got it sitting up here, right here. This is the annexation request, 100% petition for the 9.27 acres, as well as the proposed, and I apologize, it says rezoning, it is the zoning of the property to general mixed use pursuant to the Unified Development Ordinance. So from an introduction standpoint, April of this year, Town Council at one of the meetings had a consideration to provide direction for staff regarding the annexation into the town, the annexation and zoning of the property that's owned by the town into the town's municipal boundaries. They directed staff to prepare the necessary annexation application and zoning map amendment requests and to zone the property general mixed use. And then on June 29th, Town Council, or in accordance to 53150, Town of Bluffton annexation policy and the procedural manual and Town Council's direction, town staff on behalf of the property owner, which is the town, submitted the application. They asked that the property be zoned that general mixed use, and that the initial step was to have the acceptance of the annexation petition, and then to determine if it needed to go to the negotiating committee. They decided that it did not need to go to the negotiating committee. So July of this year, Town Council voted to accept that annexation petition. And then at the August 25th Planning Commission meeting, as you know, we had a workshop to go over this annexation and zoning map request. So this evening, the request is for you to hold the public hearing and to forward to Town Council a recommendation for annexation to that general mixed use for the property at 115 Bluffton Road. Here's an aerial map of the property. You can see the reason that it looks like it's 2 parcels is because at one point a right-of-way was provided to SCDOT, and that's for a storm pond, storm pipe to bisect the property. Again, you can see from a larger context. From a current standpoint, the current zoning is that T4 Hamlet Center, which is the front portion of it, about 1.5 acres, and then the T3 neighborhood, which is the remaining portion of it. These are the adjacent properties. You can see to the north, it's in Beaufort County, has that Hamlet Center, the T4 zoning district. To the south, same, the T4. To the east, to the west is the community center mixed use, and then the property that makes this all why we're here, which is the light industrial, and that is the Burnt Church Distillery. Again, we provided a copy of all of the various uses that were allowed under the current zoning in Beaufort County. And this is what the proposed use is that would be allowed under that general mixed use. We did a cost benefit analysis. This was in your packet. don't necessarily need to go over this. We went over this last time. Same here. So we are here for the request. There are review criteria for the annexation. If you'd like, we can pull it up and go through each one of them. There were 14 criteria, all meeting those requirements. Again, this is in the future annexation area map. Copy of the future land use. Growth framework map is located in that village place type assembly. Zoning map portion of it. The review criteria. I'm happy to pull up and go through all these. They are met. So this evening we're here for the public hearing and a recommendation to town council. So your actions this evening are to recommend approve with amendments, or to deny the request to town council. Happy to answer any questions.
This is a recommendation to town council.
That is correct. And we will need to hold the public hearing portion of it. We just
that before or after?
I would recommend go ahead and let's go ahead and hold the public hearing. What we need is and Commissioner Wetmore, I know you're familiar with this, but just for everybody on the Planning Commission, the way we typically open up something for public hearing is a motion to open up the agenda items for public hearing. There'll be a second, a vote, and then in a case like this, the Commissioner Wetmore will call first call for public hearing, second call for public hearing, third and final call for public hearing. And then when there is none, we'll just simply say there being no public comment, public hearing is now closed. And so that's the process.
Together?
Absolutely.
Do I have a motion to open items number 2 and 3, 115 Bluffton Road annexation and zoning map amendment for public hearing?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, first call for public comment, public hearing on items 2 and 3. Second call for public hearing on items 2 and 3. Third and final call for public comment, public hearing on items 2 and 3. There being no public comment, I close the public hearing. Did I do that?
perfect.
Okay.
All right. Great. And if I could, I'm just going to provide a little additional information for this property. So obviously this property is owned by the town of Bluffton. So we have owned this property for decades. If you've looked through the reports, it's been everything from a dump to a firing range for the police department. After that time, there was a lot of lead contaminant in the property. Town went through, did an abatement, and cleaned that up. So currently, with the Burnt Church Distillery, being annexed into the town, we're now contiguous. So the town council has been very, very direct on what they want to do. This property is it's under contract right now, or under contract negotiations for a potential affordable housing project that's going to be going there. So town council is very serious about this property, and they want to make sure that they are, they're coming in and providing enough flexibility as they move forward. Now, again, one of the things and the reasons that we're doing this right now is that one of the conditions of the contract we have is that the property has to be in the town. So part of that process is to make sure that, as we're moving forward with this public-private partnership, that we have this property in the jurisdiction, so we have jurisdiction over it. Town council, as you saw in the multiple opportunities that they've been very clear as to how they are wanting to have this property zoned.
Well, and to reiterate something you said a little earlier, the other reason for now is we could never annex it into the town until the distillery across the street made it contiguous to the town.
Correct.
30 years ago, living in one of those trailers, hearing the guns being fired in the firing range. So it's been a long time that's been. Comments, Matt?
See if anybody else had anything
Well,
first.
do we want to?
No, I'm good.
One question I have, I thought I read it was a landfill. Was it a dumping site, like a convenience center like we have, or was it a landfill?
No, it was just a dump.
The town threw debris there for years.
You have to remember, 60 years ago, you just went over onto the side of the road and you just threw out whatever you had, so.
So it's not like it's a capped landfill. That's what I was trying.
No.
Okay, so there's
No.
nothing underneath it that, like, when they started digging, we're opening up some kind
This
of.
is like every other country road in South Carolina.
But they did have to do, as you said, they did have to do remediation.
They did
cleanup because of the lead.
remediation on
Yeah.
and cleaned the soil, and they had to take out quite a bit of soil and replace it with clean dirt.
Yeah, I saw that. I have a few concerns. I understand that the reason that you're going for general mixed use here is because it creates the most flexibility. My concern for this is a pretty substantial upzoning on this property. And did the staff consider other options that still provided them flexibility but didn't quite push the bounds of the intensity so much?
The thought process is, could this go into a planned unit development? That was one thought process. With that option, that you have to have a mixture of uses. You're required to have a mixture of uses. You have to create all the necessary documents, and then you're confined to those documents for however long. The Unified Development Ordinance gives the flexibility to be able to construct what is necessary. We're still in the process. We don't know if this development means that there may be some commercial component to the front of it in order to offset the cost for the developer to construct the units. We're not sure if these units are going to be attached townhome product. We're not sure if it's going to be an apartment complex with rental and or home ownership, or if it's going to be single-family detached products. So all of that is still in the works. Town council has the ability to rezone this or to zone it as they see fit. In their mind, this is not an upzoning. This is a zoning of the property for them to be able to move forward with what they have put out in their strategic plan as to have affordable housing for the citizens of Bluffton.
There are, as I read the UDO, other options in terms of the zoning that could allow them to do commercial, that could allow them to do townhome, could allow them to do single family.
Town council has directed us to go forward with the general mixed-use development.
Okay. Is there any percentage that they're intending, I mean, with the plan as loosely as it's being constructed, there's no, as far as I can tell, there's no arrangement that would be under purview right now, even to be looking at the percentage. How do we know that this isn't ending up 75% commercial and 25%, and we're only offering a few houses for affordable housing? How do we know?
Town council has been very clear that this property will be used for affordable housing.
And let me, if I may, Commissioner Duncan, just interject. Appreciating your concerns and understanding why that particular question's asked. Obviously, it's important. Obviously, it plays a big role in the development of Bluffton, but as far as the rezoning and the annexation, what y'all choose to rezone it, this is tough to do when your applicant is the town, because obviously there are development plans that are, or at least ideas with the contracts that are in place or being negotiated as to what's going to be developed there. But ultimately, the rezoning decision needs to be independent of whatever is going to be developed on that property. So again, the criteria, as for consideration on the rezoning application is what need to be considered, not as much what can we do to what can we do to try to put the development that we want in that location. It needs to be, is this an appropriate zoning designation based off the criteria and the factors? And I think you have staff's opinion as to that.
And council's been pretty clear too. I would just say, and I don't know, Kathleen, just to just to tell you my mindset on this is it's town-owned land and it's been town-owned land forever, and I understand and appreciate your concerns. I don't share your concerns with the change in zoning use because it's a municipal use. It's not a commercial developer coming in here. It's something where if we have faith in the process and the people doing it, then I don't have the concern you have. But I understand and I appreciate the concern you have. I don't view it as an upzoning necessarily as a getting this parcel into the town.
Well, I mean, respectfully, who owns the property is less, and while I understand the ownership is important, and with each property, it's important to take an analysis of what the property is and how, but the thing about it is what we're looking at is a piece of land. And especially when you take out how it's being developed or its intended process of development, because we're not looking at a development plan here, we're looking at zoning. Contextually, on the growth map, this is identified as medium density. This GM designation, the general mixed, is, I mean, the purpose and intent of it is listed as a high intensity mixed use. That's incongruent, if you ask me. And the fact is that it's surrounded by adjacent properties that are influenced by what's happening here. The density of the number of units that they're talking about previously under, if it was all under that T3 and before, you're looking at a far less intense product than what's being proposed under GM. And I understand that in order to make this affordable housing, you have to be able to increase the density, but this seems out of accordance with the adjacent development, and it just causes me great concern. And I think when you're looking at an equal playing field of development across the board, I think the town should be held to at least a similar standard, even if they are the owners of the property and it's a public-private developer. This is this causes me major concern from a development standpoint, that upzoning.
No, I hear you and I understand, and I think there's an agreement between the two of us, and there are other commissioners that I'd love to hear from briefly on this. I come at this from a historical perspective. Things do change with time too. If we're getting a clear direction from council that this is what they want to do. Again, believe me, I understand what you're saying.
The other issue that I have with this is the nature of the intent is, as you annex properties, not to create holes. Now, and this to me, while it doesn't specifically create a closed loop, it creates an odd finger coming off. So when you talk about the purpose of this is to create a more contiguous boundary for the town of Bluffton, this actually creates to me more confusion than improving the situation. And it doesn't really close those holes. So I'm not sure that it's even meeting the intent of that for annexation either. Additionally, a concern I have and I can stop if anybody else wants to talk about that, but another concern I have is the intensity of this development with potential for the amount of commercial that could be there and the amount or the amount of residential that would be there. Coming right off of that traffic circle, there's really not much of an option in terms of, I think, how you light and sign that, and we already have enough issues at the traffic circle. It's obviously a major town issue, and this is only adding to that load and creating further congestion right at that traffic circle. And that's a health, safety, welfare concern of mine.
Well, to address that, a traffic impact analysis would have to be done.
Depending on, once they do an assessment to determine if it goes over, typically if it goes over 50 trips per hour for peak, then you would do a traffic impact analysis to determine what other improvements would then be necessary.
Whatever, let's say the town does annex this in. There will be development plans that come back.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitmore, Commissioner Duncan, for me, has raised some, significant concerns that I would like to see a little bit more, as she has said, about this general mixed use versus something else. I do realize there's got to be a balance of commercial and residential, and I'm all for affordable housing. I want to see that. There seems to be so much flexibility here, and I know the town council wants to do it. Things happen, and I'm just worried about things happening that derails us. So I do have some sympathy for your point.
I just think that it's consistent with, in my opinion, good planning practice and getting this under the purview of the town. I'm supportive of this.
I have a question. Record, have other properties been considered for the affordable housing alternatively to this site?
There are multiple properties, yes, that are under contract.
Historically, the town has done affordable. Well, let me, not to beat a dead horse, does anybody want to make a motion? There are two suggested ones in front of us.
From a discussion standpoint, if I may, I don't have an issue with the first one. It's the second one, after listening to Commissioner Duncan, that I have some questions about.
And Commissioner Delcor, if I may, before we get to the second motion, are there any sort of questions that staff or I might be able to answer to make you feel more comfortable one way or another?
How about we approach it this way? How about we go ahead, if it seems like the first one is a non-issue about annexing it in, can we go ahead and move forward, and can I entertain a motion to approve the 100% annexation petition to annex certain real property contiguous to the town's Bluffton corporate boundaries, consisting of a total of 9.2 acres, more or less, and bearing Beaufort County tax number R600-039-000-0050000.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Commissioner Duncan opposed.
Just to clarify, and the reason I'm saying that is, I think it creates a new enclave, so under the annexation criteria, number 4.
And thanks for clarifying that. That way it's in the minutes for council if they so choose to ask. On this second part, if there are concerns, now we don't know until we vote, but an amendment could be made with a pass on the council. Well, let me just open it up. Does one of the commissioners want to provide a motion?
Absolutely.
Just so we're not staying here all night and we can see where commission sits, I recommend to approve the proposed rezoning of real property contiguous to the town of Bluffton's corporate boundaries, consisting of a total of 9.27 acres, more or less, and bearing Beaufort County Tax Map Number R600-039, 000-0050-0000 to general mixed use pursuant to the Unified Development Ordinance. A second.
I'll second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Passes. Staff, if you would, please forward on to council that some of commission were concerned about the heavy use.
That would be section 3.4.3.8, consistency with the comprehensive land map or plan, because it was identified as medium intensity commercial, and GM appears to be high intensity usage. I also, for section 3.4.3.c, from a density, I'm concerned about the traffic at the circle.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion from staff or anyone else? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.